Welcome to another episode of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers in-store, online, and everywhere in between. And now, here's Sri and Peter. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter V.S. Bond, the co-host of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. I'm, as always, joined by my co-host Sri Rajagopalan. We are in episode 2 of a 6-part series called Living in an Omnichannel World. We are joined by our very special guest, Bryan Gildenberg from Omnicom. Bryan, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get right into the podcast.
Sure, and good to see you guys again, and thanks for the invite. I'm Bryan Gildenberg, currently the SVP of Commerce for the Omnicom Retail Group, a collection of agencies that specialize in retail in all of its forms, physical, digital, etc. The agencies you probably know better by their trading names, which are Tracy Locke, the Integer Group, TMA, TPN, and Haygarth. Prior to that, for a very long time, I was the head of retail research at Kantar. And for those of you who've seen me before, it's almost certainly in that role. But was a big part of Kantar's retail research team for about 23 years.
Thank you for that, Bryan. Without being too much of a fanboy, I'll mention that I was a devotee of your previous podcast. So we're very happy to have you on this show.
Well, there you go. It's good to get back to talking into a microphone again. Although it's disconcerting doing it with other people.
All right, let's jump right into it. Our topic today is Amazon's role in omnichannel transformation. What is Amazon doing to influence e-commerce? And my very first question is, should Amazon even be considered an omnichannel retailer, and does it even matter?
I'm not sure it matters, but sure, why not? I think in reality, if I were forced to write this down as my final answer on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I would probably describe Amazon as an e-commerce retailer that happens to run a brick and mortar retail chain, as well as a curiosity shop of retail formats that they've built on their own. I do think that Whole Foods I think Whole Foods is becoming a more omnichannel retailer through both home delivery and click and collect. And that might be the way I would probably describe it best, which is that Amazon, which is a pretty much pure play e-commerce player, is starting to turn Whole Foods into an omnichannel food retailer. Very good.
So, Bryan, if you're the industry giant and heavyweight in supply chain, which is arguably one of Amazon's strengths, comparable to Walmart, some days I don't know which one's better, but clearly they're two of the industrial ones. Mm-hmm. Why go through this exercise of dabbling in an in-store business model and then let it run separately as an omni-channel? Why even do this in the first place?
I think it's pretty simple. And you can't sell food without a distribution network that gets food relatively close to American homes and allows a disproportionate number of Americans the opportunity to pick that food up rather than have it delivered. In the end, the reason they're doing this, if I had 4 words to answer it, is because ice cream melts. And you can't do a home delivery model in American grocery, given how temperature variant the country is, leaving stuff on people's doorsteps and hoping that'll work. And then expecting Americans to be home to receive groceries, though obviously it's become a little easier to imagine that in the last few months. But assuming the world gets back to something like what it used to be like, home delivery in America just isn't that convenient. I mean, America's a car-based convenience country. We invented the drive-through movie, we invented the drive-through wedding, and Louisiana, God bless it, has a drive-through daiquiri hut, right? So the notion that people aren't going to want to drive to get their groceries as a primary means of convenience just seems really misguided, and I think deeply influenced by the fact that most of the people that write about e-commerce for a living live in cities, and that most of the people that buy food don't. So I think that's always been a misalignment in terms of what actual Americans with kids who live in suburbs find to be convenient, which is not trying to identify a 2-hour window in which I'm going to be home on a Saturday, but rather I know when I'm driving my car past someplace I can pick up groceries. I think Amazon had to get involved in a retail business in order to sell food effectively in the United States.
So, Bryan, are there any other chinks in Amazon's omnichannel e-commerce armor, and are they going to be able to fix those?
Sure. Yeah, I think I think in the end, the biggest challenge Amazon has is selling more than one item at a time. I mean, they're just not great at it. It takes 10.0 times longer to buy 10 things on Amazon than it does to buy one. And until that's different, they're gonna struggle in shopping occasions where buying more than one thing is the object. That's largely grocery shopping. But it's also, as we talked about in the last podcast, it's seasonal shopping as well. And this is one of the reasons why Amazon tends to underperform brick and mortar retailers in key seasonal moments, because it's just easier to go to Target and get everything you need for the summertime rather than trying to figure out how to do it one item at a time on Amazon. That's annoying. So I would say that basically the chink in Amazon's armor is really simple. It's 2 items. Look, they're a smart company. They're going to figure this out eventually. But the brick and mortar retailers that can figure out how to sell you more than one thing and put value behind that proposition are going to do pretty well versus Amazon. And I think a lot of that is food retailer. The other area for Amazon that continues to be a challenge is any category like apparel that requires intelligent curation to be sold effectively. Those are the 2 big ones. So one item at a time and intelligent curation. Amazon's not particularly great at either of those.
So Bryan, on one hand, having spent 25 years in CPG, I couldn't agree more with you that the entire consumer goods industry's brands have been curated over the course of time, anchored on a P&L that actually depends on being successful if it's part of a basket behavior.
Yeah.
Enough consumer studies have been put out over this and over a century perhaps, and enough strat plans and JBPs have been written based on basket behavior, even though calculations are done at an item level, it's all based on basket behavior. And clearly Amazon is quite the opposite, with a weak user experience at best for basket level shopping. While I say that, Bryan, I'm also fully aware that if Amazon wasn't in the ecosystem with the clout and weight that it has, retail's transformation towards digital ecosystems would not be happening at any pace we've experienced in the last 7 to 10 years. So what is this spark, and how has Amazon forced that retail transformation, if despite being the master of individual purchases only?
Well, I think in the end, I think, Sri, this is one of many things you and I have talked about before. I'm pretty sure Amazon would be the first to tell you that if they hadn't stumbled into, something about their proposition that made them Earth's most customer-centric company, they wouldn't have gotten anywhere. I think they wandered into a unique confluence of the advancement of digital technology and the exhaustion of the American mom. So, we talked about this a lot when I was at Kantar about how as the age of motherhood goes up and the busyness of parenting increases, mom's just too tired to go shopping. And when, at 9:30 at night, phone open, semi-conscious on the couch, mom discovered that through Prime, she could buy stuff and get it delivered to her house in 1 day or 2 for free. That's the need state they're solving for, and it's really not about money per se. And I'm not even sure time's the best way to think about it. What Amazon has done, they've solved the American energy crisis, particularly the energy crisis of the American mom in a way just fundamentally different than anybody tried to solve it before. So if I'm spending 5 minutes to buy 7 things on Amazon, that would have taken me 2 minutes in Target. If I'm doing that sitting on my couch watching Chopped, that's a win, right? I mean, rather than hauling myself to Target at 9:30 at night. I think that's the key.
And you get a tasty treat to eat at the end.
Sure, yes. Well, you get to watch other people eat a tasty treat, sure.
Anytime I get to see my friend Amanda Freitag on Chopped, I consider that a win. Just
nice
itself, but
nice. There you go.
But so I just saw that Instacart introduced a new ad network. So my question is, what's the role of digital media in this journey, and is it transforming rapidly because of omnichannel transformation?
Well, yeah, I think it is transforming a fair amount, and I think the role of digital media. And I guess I'd break this up into 2 things. One, I think the question you're trying to get at, without putting words in your mouth, is digital retail media, right? So what would, as opposed to digital media in general, I think the role of retail media is one, it's varied right now. So if you look at like what Walmart, Target, Kroger are trying to do as the three biggest non-Amazon players in the ecosystem, they're trying to do pretty different things, right? So, Walmart's trying to create its version of Amazon. Target's really selling you access to its guests through its audience network. And Kroger's really trying to sell you the ability to effectively measure campaigns based on a loyalty card data system they've had before. So I think it's still pretty nascent in terms of what that does. I would say in the end, I think that retail media is going to play a very specific role occupying a space between sort of brand consideration and brand conversion. That's probably the best way to put it, or demand creation and demand conversion. And I think that's the job that it was kind of put on this earth to do. So it'll be interesting to see how those media platforms evolve and what they do. But yeah, I think they're going to be a valuable bridge between what used to be called brand marketing and what used to be called trade marketing, if done right.
Folks, media is such a big topic and going through such radical transformation in the industry because of digital that we're going to dedicate a whole episode to media. We're actually going to call it Media 2020, and it'll be episode 5 of this 6-part series, or episode 11 in the Shri and PVSP series. And we'll be hitting up stuff such as why is this important, and who's even answering the dirty question, who should be paying for the media. So we'll get to that, but thank you.
All right.
Now I'm going to switch to a completely different area in the ecosystem, what's required for transformation towards a digital retailing future. And that simple one, Bryan, is, of course, we know Amazon is the heavyweight of supply chain, for sure, especially when it comes to each's delivery and each's purchasing and satisfaction. But for sure, they have really created some head scratchers for manufacturers and brands when it comes to their own supply chain ecosystem. Do you see manufacturers changing and twisting to meet Amazon's needs? Everything from packaging to how many you put in a case pack. How do you do chargebacks, which are radically different on Amazon? Just the whole ecosystem. Do you see that changing?
Sure. What else are you going to do, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember the conversations that people were having, especially in the grocery industry, about whether the grocery industry would ever change because Walmart wanted to sell groceries differently than Kroger or Albertsons did. Yeah, I mean, if you sell something through the largest customer, one of the 2 largest customers in the country, yes, you have to change your systems to do it. Moses didn't wander down from a tablet and a mountain and have "thou shalt be able to achieve the lowest possible cost per unit through mass production and highly efficient scaled logistics" on it. Was one of the things. I mean, that was a unique window in time. That's how Walmart created a point of difference, and that the ecosystem that got built behind Walmart was one that emphasized low unit cost over flexibility and scale over batch processing. And that's all got to get unwound if the retailer that's going to drive most of the growth in the future isn't interested in that. So, that's, and in the same way that Walmart wasn't interested in any of the allowance-based, goofy discounting that the supermarket industry used, and all that stuff went away too. So yeah, it'll change.
That's very helpful. Getting on that track of the retailer side of the ecosystem, putting Amazon and Walmart aside, are there some big ecosystem changes you've seen from kind of everybody else, from a Target to a Meijer to a Publix to a Shoe Carnival to a whoever? What are we seeing are some of the big ecosystem changes they've had to?
Well, let's talk a lot about Shoe Carnival. So as I think there's some good stuff happening there. Well, look, I mean, yeah, I think that the easiest way to think about this is that if you think about the assets that are involved in the delivery of value to a shopper from a retailer, it's just those assets, or the role of those assets is changing. So, stores are going to be DCs as well as stores. DCs are going to be direct ship centers as well as DCs. You're going to have, the store as a returns platform, not just a selling platform. The store is going to act as a provider of other services that aren't retail centric. So if you just look at Walgreens right now in terms of the number of different partnerships that they're engaged in to be able to do that. So yeah, and I would just say, yeah, I just think you're gonna see assets deployed more flexibly in terms of what their role is within the captive value chain of the retailer, and also more diversely in terms of figuring out what other value propositions we can bring to the table to provide a more holistic solution than the relentless efficiency of one item at a time transaction driving that Amazon is excellent at. And that's where, so yes, I think you'll see a significant reconfiguration of the assets that drive retail over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think DSW was one of the first retailers to follow the lead that you just indicated, which is using their stores as the distribution center rather than shipping from a central location. So
Sure.
It depends on what works for the retailer.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Ahold, if you go back to Stop and Shop and the Ahold food chains, they've been doing this. They've been using warerooms in their back room to fulfill Peapod for, probably longer than anybody cares to remember. But I mean, they started that trend probably 15, 20 years ago.
So Bryan, a thing that's been very scary to me in this industry evolution is when I look at brand P&Ls having arguably touched some of the largest brands in the world today, is you referred, when I asked you a previous question about supply chain ecosystems twisting and turning, you said no choice, but at the same time, you also said the muscle power of these supply chain ecosystems is really built on bulk repetitive production again and again and scale on day one.
Yep.
Innovation, because innovation today largely for scale brands is still a truckload delivery ecosystem, and if it doesn't meet the hurdle rates, you don't create it. But all of a sudden, if you're in a supply chain ecosystem which start thinking about eaches, like, isn't that a P&L twister?
It is, and yeah, and I think there's a lot of questions that come into this, which again, get to, the second commandment on the tablet is not thou shalt only allocate capital to driving the lowest cost possible unit for the fewest number of things, right? And I think this is one of the big questions that if you're the CEO of a company today, this is probably the thing I think you've got to be most focused on, which is teaching your board that the long-term survival of your business may require a more flexible capital base than the one that they grew up thinking was the definition of efficiency. So, the way I sometimes put this to people is that I think the companies that are winning in the market today are the ones that understand that it's not just the optimization of capital that's the game, it's the allocation of it. And how and where capital gets allocated is a big part of that conversation. Because yeah, I think if you're trying to optimize a P&L and you don't have the mechanical ability to walk and chew gum at the same time, you got a problem. And that's going to require a series of partnerships as a bridge towards just a different capital allocation model that builds flexibility and responsiveness into mass production and high velocity. I mean, that's just where the world's going to end up going. And I think in the end, it probably does change the launch strategy for new products for a CPG company or a branded company in terms of, yeah, if you're going to go big, go big. I mean, go big or go niche. I mean, a lot of what passes for innovation today is small ideas off big brands. And that's the part I think that gets really problematic. If you're going to devote your resource chain to massive blockbuster style innovations that can truly change a category globally, and niche opportunities that spring up because something about a specific set of consumers and can sell something they really want.
And so the big one for me on that one, Bryan, was how you referred to capital allocation. And I'm not so sure many of the scale brands that I've touched and I referred to have that formula still figured out. But that was a great last question for today's episode.
Yeah. Well, I would just encourage you before we sign off. It's just, this is one of the areas where, the board relationships here really matter. And it's the experience set of the management team that regularly talks to the board, because they're the ones in the end that are mostly responsible for deciding the pace of capital allocation versus other things you can do with surplus capital, like give it back to shareholders or buy back stock. I would just say the simplest thing you can do to fix that is to look at the median age of people that talk to the board in a year, and make a commitment to yourself to lower that by 3 or 4 years every year. Get them different perspectives, get them people to viscerally understand that the world is moving in a different direction, and can deliver that with both quantitative rigor and passion in a way that your board, who's probably 15 years older than your management team, will understand and be able to shape capital allocation accordingly.
Listen, Bryan, thank you very much for joining us for this episode. It was extremely informative. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this. As we mentioned earlier, below here, you can follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn at #ShreeandPVSB. We also have a link to our podcast where you can download this audio, and also to find all of the YouTube videos in a playlist. So thank you very much. Next week, we'll be back with episode 3, where we're going to talk about omnichannel transformation beyond Amazon with other retailers that are being driven by all sorts of new habits. So with that, Bryan, thank you. Shree, appreciate you as always being with us, and we look forward to seeing you for part 3 in the series, Living in an Omnichannel World, with special guest star Bryan Gildenberg. Thank you.
Look forward to the next one.